The Biden administration just made a move so devastating to the future of the US economy, we are going to look back at this decision as the pivotal moment that China officially surpassed the US in both innovation and industrial capacity. Let's break it down. Earlier this week, Biden announced the quadrupling of US tariffs against Chinese EVs. Yes, you heard that right. The US government is literally raising tariffs on Chinese EVs from 25% to an astonishing 100%. Now, at first, this might seem like a reasonable idea. I'm sure many Americans are thinking, well, that's good. We don't want cheap Chinese vehicles overtaking the American auto industry. I'm sure these tariffs are put in place to help ensure our American auto companies can continue to thrive in the future. But there's a lot more to this story, because Biden isn't just stopping with Chinese EVs. He wants to take down China and all of the world's most important industries. I just imposed a series of tariffs on goods made in China: 25% on steel and aluminum, 50% on semiconductors, 100% on EVs, and 50% on solar panels. China is determined to dominate these industries. I'm determined to ensure America leads the world in them. This is a bold claim from Biden for two main reasons. The first is Biden is completely delusional on America's current level of manufacturing. Our factories are decreasing, not increasing in America, and he has no plan to reverse that trend. Second, Biden is passing tariffs that will not only backfire and hurt the US economy in the future, it's going to hurt the average American consumer the most. Let's break it down. We'll start with steel production, where this graph shows that in 2022, China produced over 1 billion tons of steel, equating to 54% of the world's total. The United States, on the other hand, produced a mere 80 million tons. The cold hard truth is that the American steel industry peaked over 50 years ago and has declined by 40% since 1973. There is no credible evidence to support Biden's claim that somehow the US can ever lead the world in steel production. For reference, let's just look at China's historic rise to the top. In 1967, China's steel production was only 3% of the world total. 30 years later, it overtook every other top steel producing nation, and by the 2000s, China consistently started increasing its year-on-year steel production by double-digit percentages. You can't just send out a tweet and magically hope US factories will start outproducing China. But America's lack of manufacturing capabilities goes well beyond just steel. When we look at the data from aluminum, it's the same. China is the world's largest primary aluminum producer for one main reason: the country's strong manufacturing industry. And this is why the tweet from Biden makes zero sense. America is facing a shortage of skilled workers and a new generation of youth who simply don't want to work factory jobs. Currently, the US is the 9th largest producer of aluminum, just behind Norway and just above Iceland. Really? We barely produce more aluminum than Iceland, a country whose total population is only 382,000 people, yet somehow Biden believes the US will just magically overtake China in production. But just wait, because the EV industry gets even better. China accounts for more than 60% of the global electric car sales, with more than half of the world's total electric cars on roads in China. China is pushing so far ahead in EVs, it has already exceeded its 2025 target for new energy vehicle sales. Because auto sales are only half the equation, China also controls 80% of the EV battery supply chain, according to White House estimates. What this simply means is that no country in the world can produce an EV battery without the help of China. And it's right at this point where Biden's claim of America dominating these industries becomes quite comical. Take a look at this graph, which shows solar panel production, and once again, China is dominating this industry, producing an astonishing 78% of solar modules. Forget about China. Vietnam currently produces 3 times more solar modules than the United States. It would take a major industrial effort for America to make up this ground against Vietnam, but yet somehow we are supposed to believe that the US can just come out of nowhere, increase its production by 40-fold, and somehow overtake China. Now, I wanted to break down each of these industries for you, because it's important that we understand the reality of the situation. Sadly, we are in an election year in the United States, and presidential candidates will say anything they can to garner votes. I'm sure many Americans would love to see the US become an industrial powerhouse and dominate these industries, but the harsh reality is this is nothing more than an empty promise from Biden. There is no way the US can compete with China in terms of manufacturing. We've been outsourcing our production to China for decades, and China can produce things faster, cheaper, and better than American factories. I mean, why do you think your iPhone is made in China? Because these sanctions will come back to hurt the very people that Joe Biden is supposed to be serving, the average American consumer. Joe Biden knows this. And believe it or not, he even admitted sanctions like this indeed hurt American citizens. Check out this July 2019 article titled, "Biden Slams Trump's Trade War, Even as He Calls to Get Tough on China." And now listen to this incredible quote from Biden. "But President Trump may think he's being tough on China. All that he's delivered as a consequence of that is American farmers, manufacturers, and consumers losing and paying more. His economic decision making is so short-sighted, and as short-sighted as the rest of his foreign policy." Wow, I really like the 2019 Biden and couldn't agree with him more. But I'm sure Biden can't remember saying this. And even if he did, he wouldn't publicly admit it because once again, it's an election year. And in order to win those November votes, US politicians, regardless of their political party, need to appear tough on China. But now let's take it one step further and answer this question. Will these new tariffs even work? Luckily, we have some impressive data to show you that will instantly reveal the answer. You see, tariffs against China certainly isn't a new thing. In fact, the US first started sanctioning China's solar industry some 12 years ago. Just look at this Reuters article from May 2012 announcing the new tariffs. And I have to be honest, the tariffs did work incredibly well. Here is the report detailing the Commerce Department's imposed tariffs on Chinese solar panels of as much as 250% of their sales price. The result was a rapid decline in US imports of Chinese solar equipment, from 2.8 billion in 2011 to less than 400 million in 2020. That's an over 86% decline in Chinese imports in just 9 years. A tremendous success for the US government, correct? Well, not exactly, because despite blocking Chinese imports into America, these new tariffs did absolutely nothing to revitalize the US solar industry. Over 12 years of the US government trying their best to block Chinese solar panel imports, and China still rose to the top, becoming the global leader with a 78% market share. Meanwhile, the US still only manages to produce a measly 1.9%. The harsh reality for Biden, the US government, and once again the average American consumer is that tariffs simply won't stop China, nor will it help America close the manufacturing gap. French geopolitical commentator Antoine Bertrand documented this exact story recently on Twitter, and his research found out just how far the US solar market has contracted since it first started introducing tariffs against China. Polysilicon, the main ingredient for solar panels, North America used to have a 28.7% market share. It's now down to 5.6%. Wafer production is now non-existent as of 2021. Solar cells have been reduced from 4.6% to 0.6%, and modules reduced from 7.6% to 2.4%. Anwar goes on to share, "At the end of the day, what this shows is that you can't tariff and subsidize your way into creating homegrown industries. What matters, as the Chinese have well understood, is that an incredibly efficient, innovative, and low-cost manufacturing process. And actually, more often than not, tariffs and subsidies actually prevent this, because it shields local companies from the competition and as such doesn't incentivize them to be competitive, as they don't need to be. To be the best, you need competition. And one example I always reference is the space race between the Soviet Union and the US in the 1960s. When the Soviets became the first nation to put a man in space, this was absolute fuel for the US government and NASA. Do you think the US enjoyed seeing the Soviet Union beat them to space? Of course not. But because of intense competition, it inspired NASA engineers to work harder and faster and ultimately win the space race and put an American on the moon first. And this is where I see a much larger problem brewing for the United States. Because when a nation can only resort to sanctioning, imposing tariffs, and trying to contain another country's rise, it essentially sends a message to the world that we can't fairly compete, so we will now resort to trying to stop your growth. We call this the Tonya Harding approach, as it references the disgraced American figure skater who knew she didn't have the talent to beat her biggest rival, Nancy Kerrigan, on the ice. So Tonya resorted to hiring a hitman who smashed Nancy's knee before the competition. Of course, this plan failed miserably, and Tonya Harding's reputation and career was finished. Is this really the road the US government wants to go down with China? But another issue with Biden's tariff scheme is that it also affects US foreign policy, and once again creates an image problem for the United States on the world stage. Let me explain. One of the biggest talking points we've heard regarding China the past few weeks is the term overcapacity. Essentially, the US government is claiming China is not playing by the rules, as the Chinese government supports and hands out subsidies to certain industries it deems important and necessary for future development. But look at how Janet Yellen contradicts herself in this recent quote. We're very explicitly subsidizing investments into these important strategic areas. We don't want to see massive Chinese subsidies that will just drive our firms out of business. But let's just use some common sense here and realize that governments around the world subsidize entire industries, sectors, and companies. In China, industries such as artificial intelligence, electric vehicles, and batteries are all deemed essential for the future of China's economy and given preferential tax structures and support from the government. But this is no different from how the US government operates as well. And here's a fun fact that many people don't know. The US government is currently subsidizing the EV industry with more money than China's government. In addition, Biden just passed the $50 billion CHIPS Act, which was instrumental in funding the building of a new TSMC semiconductor factory in Arizona. And the reason for this is simple, because microchips is the one industry that the United States does hold a competitive advantage over China. Although China is working very hard and successfully to close this gap. But the US government wants to keep this gap as large as possible. Hence why Biden passed this $50 billion subsidy bill to support the industry. But once again, we have a case of rules for me, but not for thee. The US government feels it's perfectly okay to fund and subsidize industries they deem important, but simultaneously criticize China for doing the exact same thing. Let's take this one step further and show you why this matters in our foreign policy. Take a look at this fascinating article from the New York Times. The end of TikTok is a propaganda win for Beijing. Inside, it reveals a stunning revelation that I know for a fact many members of US Congress have overlooked. America's moral authority on maintaining open internet platforms will look very different if it bans TikTok. After years of enduring American sermonizing about free speech and open trade, autocrats would now be able to cite Washington's own example when they interfere with speech platforms that displease them. The US has been preaching for decades that our country is the champion for an open internet, but now our politicians are taking us down the road of internet censorship. Everyone in the world, including Chinese citizens, know that China's government censors the internet. But now, what makes the US government any different from China? This is the fundamental problem, and once again, why these inconsistencies in US foreign policy create a massive image problem for the US government. I'll conclude today's video with one final point, and it's another example of US foreign policy contradiction. Once again, for decades, the United States has been preaching the benefits of an open market. But with 100% import tariffs on Chinese EVs, the US government is now saying, we only like an open market if it means the US can benefit. If China is going to benefit, let's close the door. But here's the harsh reality of the situation. I want you to watch this video from a popular content creator who reveals the truth on the real reason why the US government wants to ban these Chinese EVs.
I know why Chinese cars aren't sold in America. It's because they would dominate.
I've never seen a more direct and accurate assessment of the situation. It's the same reason why US politicians want to ban TikTok, because China created something better. Don't believe me? Watch the rest of this video and tell me what American or European auto company, for that matter, is producing anything close to this level of craftsmanship.
I know why Chinese cars aren't sold in America. It's because they would dominate. This is the Yangwang U8. It's the luxury arm of BYD. You get LiDAR sensors here, more LiDAR up there. In the front, your main headlights are here, but at night, this entire thing lights up, and it looks amazing. You get one electric motor on each wheel, and combined, it makes 1,180 horsepower. And if you need to do a quick U-turn, watch this. So my charge port is here, and when I open it, this will tell me my charge level. But on this side, you put in gas. That powers your turbo 4-cylinder generator. This doesn't power the car, it just makes electricity for those motors. On a full charge and a full tank of gas, this can do over 600 miles. Inside, you get this panoramic roof that literally has shooting stars, and it can also do this. 你好, Yangwang.
我在.
开天窗.
收到.
Hey! You also get pillows in your headrest. My seats are heated, ventilated, and massaging. I get a passenger screen, ambient lighting underneath, more ambient lighting up here, and this curved display that works ultra fast. You also get a front and rear locker, 50-watt charging pads, a built-in cooler, storage space under here, and what's this? Smile. You also get this driver display with touch controls, this gorgeous steering wheel, tons of space in the back, a screen here, another one there, a third screen here, and another wireless charging pad. Not only are my back seats heated and ventilated, they can also massage me. Even my trunk has leather, wood, and suede, and look how big it is. It also has hydraulic suspension and can float in water.
Everyone, thank you for making it to this point in the video and exploring this topic of US sanctions, China's overcapacity, and the faults with America's foreign policy approach to China. As always, we are working incredibly hard to bring you the latest geopolitical updates from around the globe. And if you enjoyed today's video, watch this video on how China might just have found an incredible loophole through these sanctions. And most incredibly, it's coming from our neighbors down south. Click here to watch this video on China and Mexico's relationship. And I look forward to seeing you all in our next video soon.